The world is sound. Sound is the music of life.
For the Edge of Night, next over most of these CBS stations.
Oh, isn't that nice? Look at that. All those pretty colors. That's very pretty. Hey, horsey. Look at pretty.
We're surrounded by sound. It's hard to imagine what it would be like to live in silence.
When I ride my bike to work, I get a feeling for what I wish I could hear. When I had my hearing, I was a classroom teacher, and I taught U.S. history, American government, things like that. And I was a very verbal type of person in class. And I always tried to get a lot of participation from the kids. You know, how are things going? Why is this happening? And all this to try to get people to think. And when I lost my hearing, that was out. You know that what originally happened was that I was in a fire as a result of some tank truck driving and a spill of fuel and all. And while I was in the hospital, I was getting, I suppose, what you'd call life-saving treatment, that all of a sudden I just wasn't responsive, and people, you know, wondered why I didn't pay attention at all. And finally, someone realized that what I had done had lost my hearing. I tried to even forget, you know, that I couldn't hear. I kept on asking the question, but how come I don't hear? How come I don't hear? And finally, just the personal nurse I had that let me know a little bit more and more that I really was deaf. No idea that there was hope involved or anything else. I was just deaf, and that's the way it was left. When I finally returned home from the hospital without my hearing, I was very concerned about my job because I could see a family that was going to be on welfare or something. But I was lucky that the school was interested and that they had enough confidence in me that they wanted me to stay on. And I was very concerned about going back to the classroom, but they thought that I'd fit better into the library operation. It takes less oral communication in a library, and luckily you can talk in many cases on a just person-to-person basis where lip reading becomes possible. Some of the aspects of my job are difficult now that when the phone rings I can't answer it, so there's always someone answering it for me. I'm sure there are lots of questions that are asked here that they don't get the answer, or at least the detail that I would want to get. People don't like to struggle with a lip reader. Someone has a hard time communicating, and they politely just steer clear of you. If they have to struggle, they'll find the answer or go without the answer. You just feel isolated because most of the time you're around people, at least in my family, my job, and I have lunch and there are teachers all around me. They're discussing school politics, their latest trip, what have you, and I don't participate. Some of my closest friends in the faculty, we don't have much to do with each other now because we used to be able to talk easily. Now I just can't understand them, and you can't carry on much of a conversation. They have to write to you. And I'm in just situation after situation where I'm trying to understand or should understand, but really I find I'm just sitting there and other people doing the communicating. I'm there physically, but that's all. when you're here, you just can figure you're pretty well out socially. You have made some old-time friends that stick with you. You make a few special new friends. But in a social situation, you just don't fit. If I'm out bowling with a group, they're all chatting, and all I'm doing is bowling. I'm not doing the side play. Or when there's a light opera that comes on in town, I'd like to take my wife. She's going to go with some woman friend out with me. So it completely curtails what you'd consider our dating activity. That if I go someplace, it's better if I do something like camping where there are just trees around me and my personal family, or if I go to something where there's not oral communication, camping, driving, or things like that. And finally, someone, it must have been state compensation insurance, that suggested that I go to a hearing foundation and see if anything could be done. And it must have been the second or third visit, but I remember one of the doctors came up and said that there was hope, that they were working on this new electronic instrument that might help. And it's the first optimistic word I had heard. It's just unbelievable, the difference between just a void there of wondering what you're going to do and having hope.
That we can overcome with a...
Charles Grazer, for 10 years, had known the frustration and loneliness of the deaf.
Now, what we do, or what we...
He had the courage to have a set of electrodes implanted into his inner ear. Before the turn of the century, Faraday discovered that if an electric current is passed through the head, the individual will hear a sound. It was soon discovered that many deaf persons would hear a sound if an electric current was applied near the ear. This information was to haunt generations of otologists who realized that somehow, if we could apply minute electric currents of sufficient complexity, we could indeed make the deaf hear. During the 60s, information gathered from animal experimentation regarding the implanting of wire electrodes into the body, combined with the rapidly advancing electronic technology, made it apparent that the time had finally come for us to take the giant step of making a totally deaf person hear through electronics. The system consists of a set of 5 tiny wires which are led from a button behind the ear into the snail-like inner ear structure called the cochlea. A 6th wire is placed into one of the windows of the inner ear to serve as a ground, so that minute, complex electrical fields can be introduced around the ends of the hearing nerve. Then started 2 years of testing and retesting, building and rebuilding complex electronic circuitry to give Charles Grazer and potentially millions of people like him the gift of sound. One is brown. The basic concept, bring in sound through a microphone, convert it to electronic impulses to stimulate and activate the hearing nerve through the implanted electrodes.
Orange is 3.
Thus we were able to bypass the destroyed hearing cells in Charles Grazer's inner ear.
Yellow is 4.
Now we line up the electrodes so they match the electrode arrangement in the ear, and we now can tell what circuit is connected with which electrode ending in the inner ear.
At first, simple electric signals were used to produce tones.
All right, that's 0.03 volts. All right. We will now go to the 90 cycle and repeat the test.
A system was built that allowed Charles Grazer to try many different circuits by turning the dials as he listened to various sounds. Over the next year and a half, based on the information gained, a new electronic system with many variables was built to make it possible for him to attach meaning to complex sounds.
Definitely there's some resonance.
Here's my laughter.
By having Grazer view filmed sounds, he could then adjust his sound controls so that what he was hearing through his new electronic ear would most accurately approximate the sound he was watching on film.
Pretty good hand clapping.
After hundreds of experiments, Grazer began to show an increasing awareness of everyday sounds.
Some footsteps. I like this because I hear a heel and then I think I hear both parts of the feet hit.
This in turn led to his initial recognition of voice and voice communication. At this stage, television, pictures, and sounds were employed to help him learn to distinguish words and speech.
There are more old jokes here tonight than at the senior citizens' wife-swapping party.
The next step, a wearable aid to constantly surround him with the sounds of his daily life.
Would you comment about the learning process?
It's been real exciting because I've been coming in and just listen to TV and hear more of the background noises and know that it is a spray can that is hissing the spray, or hear a person walking or the door slam. I was amazed the other day that someone picked the phone up off the cradle, and I heard that. All these things are happening, and it's been a long time, over 10 years now. I fully expect to hear again. I'm not sure it's exactly what everybody else does or not, but I expect to hear. And I think there are all kinds of people, there are these instruments of God, or whatever you want to call it, and they're working towards, a solution to these problems.